Russia's about to take over the month-long presidency of the UN Security Council. Let's talk about what that means for the UN agenda with Russia's envoy to the UN, Vitaly Churkin. Mr. Churkin, thanks ever so much for taking the time tonight to join us on RT. I mean, what then is at the forefront of Russia's minds now you've taken the presidency for a month? What's top of the list to tackle? A long list, isn't it?
Well, it is a long list, and it's looking like a very crowded month of March. The highlight of our presidency is going to be a ministerial debate on Afghanistan, which will be chaired by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and we expect the participation of a number of foreign ministers from both Security Council member and non-member states, because everybody will be invited to speak, all members of the United Nations, those who choose to participate. And the mandate of the UN mission in Afghanistan is going to be extended for another year. And that, of course, is going to be a very important year for Afghanistan with the upcoming presidential elections in April of 2014, with the unclear prospects of foreign military presence when US forces and ISAF international forces are going to pull out in 2014, the unclear process of prospects for national dialogue and reconciliation. So there are so many important issues with a lot at stake before the Security Council that we think that this is going to be a very important element of our program of work for the month of March. Then I think we're going to have an important discussion on... please go ahead.
Sorry, so there's a small delay on the line. Also, of course, the other big important decision or talks to be had about what to do with Syria next. A big schism amongst various UN members about what is the best thing to do. How's Russia going to try and bring people together then over the next month?
Well, there is nothing specific at this point in our program of work on Syria, but of course Syria comes our way every now and then under different circumstances. For instance, yesterday there was a stirring briefing to the consultation of the Security Council of humanitarian agencies describing the awful situation in that country. So of course there is a lot of worry and frequent discussions in the Security Council of the situation in Syria. Our position is very simple. We believe that the violence must stop, and for that dialogue must be established without precondition. And the government is saying that they have outlined their negotiating team and they have outlined their proposals for dialogue. There is a Geneva document of June 2012, which we believe should serve as the consensus basis for dialogue. Unfortunately, in the past few days, the opposition seems to have been backtracking from the original statement which was made by the leader of the national coalition, Mr. Khatib, about readiness to go into dialogue with the Syrian government. This is the key issue. Without dialogue, I'm afraid, and without the political will on the part of all Syrians, all the main stakeholders in that country, the international community cannot do much. We cannot resolve that crisis for them. We can help them. Russia is trying to do exactly that by talking at the same time with the government and the various opposition groups, urging them to enter into dialogue. But unless they themselves make that determination, I'm afraid violence will continue and the crisis will continue to spiral.
And of course, the Syrian opposition very much in the news again today. They've been promised more non-lethal help from the US. If that's the case, where's the lethal support coming from, do you think? What's Russia's current view on that? Well,
there is this general understanding that maybe Qatar is supplying weapons to Syria, but here I'm basing myself mostly on newspaper accounts and on the previous experience, because it's well known now that in the course of the crisis in Libya, for instance, Qatar happened to be a major supplier of weapons into that country. You know, there is all this talk about non-lethal assistance from the United States. There is a certain clear division of labor. The United States, for a number of reasons, chooses not to sally its hands with direct supply of weapons to the armed groups, because among them there are some terrorists and others with whom the United States would prefer not to be associated. But at the same time, they give a wink and a nod to those who provide direct military aid to rebel armed groups. And all this is very unfortunate, because it takes attention away from the need to enter into political dialogue. Instead of asking for more assistance of various sorts, the opposition groups, including the National Council, should be sticking to their initial offer or expression of readiness to enter into dialogue should be amplifying their political program, because we have not seen a political program from them. The government, in the speech of President Assad in January, did outline a political program. Maybe it was not satisfactory for the opposition, but at least it was there. They should have and should now reciprocate by outlining their political program, which they could bring to the table of dialogue with the government and Russia, and we hope other important members of the international community would be there to facilitate those discussions.
Ambassador, I'd like to talk for a moment about the latest in Iran now. Still no significant breakthrough, of course, in those talks in Kazakhstan. Iran said they were in some ways positive, but the general consensus was not a lot was done. The further talks were agreed. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, my understanding was that it was a sort of a positive meeting, and it's, of course, very good news that they have already now agreed to have an expert meeting within weeks, and then in early April, another session of this negotiations between Mrs. Ashton and Mr. Jalili and the political directors from the 6 countries who are accompanying those talks and negotiating with Iran. But my understanding is that they yet have to tackle the core of the issues. And the 6 brought new proposals to the table with active participation of Russia in that process.
Was anything radically new in those talks, sir? Do we know?
In Kazakhstan. Well, you know, not really radically new, but there are some new important elements which should make it more attractive for the Iranians to finally enter into negotiations on the core of the matter, and that is yet to happen.
I'd like to ask you about Bradley Manning. I'm sure you're familiar with the case. He's pleaded guilty to 10 of the 22 charges. He's now likely to spend 20 years behind bars. What are your thoughts on that development today? It's the breaking news this hour on RT.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Yeah, the Bradley Manning case. I'm sure, sir, you're absolutely up to speed with it. In the last hour or two, Bradley Manning, the American private, the whistleblower as they're calling, was pleaded.
I'm sorry. This is not. I'm sorry. This is not something we deal with in the United Nations, and I'm not up to this.
Absolutely, nothing wrong with that answer, sir, at all. Last quick question. North Korea, it's audaciously ploughing ahead with its nuclear test. Doesn't that strong criticism that came from the UN really only though amount to a slap on the wrist?
Well, we made very quickly a press statement where we condemned this nuclear test and expressed our determination to provide an adequate reaction in the form of a resolution of the Security Council. The United States has prepared a draft of this resolution, but so far they have chosen not to engage the Russian delegation in the discussion of that resolution. We believe that there should be a strong signal of the Security Council to DPRK of disapproval of this dangerous course of action. But at the same time, this should be a kind of a resolution which would also help lead towards the resumption of 6-party talks and a diplomatic final resolution of this issue of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Vitaly Churkin, the Russian ambassador to the UN. We know you're a busy man and we do appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.